Alrighty, I'm back. Miss me? Probably not. Anyway, so like I said, I've read a bunch of books. So my rule every year, beginning of the year, end of the year, middle of the year, whatever. My rule with reading is always read one nonfiction a year and read one classic a year. Now, I didn't read a whole lot of classics in high school. Um, I read a couple here and there, and I skimmed a couple. Like my senior year of high school, we weren't the advanced kids, but we weren't like the extra help kids. We were like closer to the advanced classes, but we weren't there. If that made sense. Like we had the grade points, but we didn't have it was weird. But the way it was my teacher, Mr. Comtoys, was super cool, and he was like, "Hey, so long story short, you guys are super smart. Here's kind of like the reading curriculum. Let me know and pick your books." Like, I don't, we were able to pick from all of the other grades, like all of the other AP courses from ninth grade to 12th grade. And so we read a lot of those. And some of them were classics, but some of them really weren't classics. But long story short, as I grew up to be, older and really appreciative of books and music and stuff like that, I started thinking, like, you can't love the new and be obsessed about the new without respecting the old and what came from the old. And then nonfiction kind of just keeps you up to date with certain things in the world, or certain categories or aspects or stuff like that. So at the beginning of this year, end of last year, beginning of this year, I read a book that I've owned since I was 14 years old. For time frame, I'm 27. So this book my mom bought me when I was 14. So this book really hits personally right now. And so I read, so before I tell you this, the reason why it hits personally is because I miss my mom. Not because I want to be this. I don't want to be this. I just wanted to let you know that I miss my mom. So, Helter Skelter. This is why I said I don't want to be a cult leader. I don't like people too much. Okay, phrasing is a thing. Talking is not my thing. I've been quarantined for way too damn long. I like people. It's just crowded places and controlling other people's lives. That's what I don't like. Phrasing is a thing. I don't like controlling people. Like, obviously with an escape room, you gotta control them to a limit. Like, don't break my shit. Basically, it's what it is. Just don't break my shit. But as far as controlling, hey, you can't do this. You have to think this way. You have to take these drugs. Nah, not my job, not my responsibility, not my circus, not my monkeys. Kids, yeah. I have a kid brother who's a kid, literally a kid. He is still in single digit ages. You gotta control that to an aspect, because you gotta help raise him. But he's his own person. But that's a whole other spiel that I'm going off on. So I read Helter Skelter. As you can see, it's a really big book, and the lettering is really small. So this took me a minute to read. Not because it was hard, it was just there was a lot to take in regards to information and what happens. And what really helped me was that there was parts in this book. So you have part 1 to part, I think, 4, and then you had the epilogue. I don't remember, but the chapters were pretty decently long. This book is even pretty heavy. So yes, Helter Skelter is based off of the Manson murders. So if you don't know what the Manson murders are, it is back in the 1960s. There was a man named Charles Manson who has since passed. I believe he passed in 2016. With a family, and he literally called them the family. And there was lots of girls, minute men. And he had a cult. It was basically a cult. It basically was a cult. But long story short, in the 1960s, Manson and the family, there was a handful. I think there was about 5 of them. That went on a murder spree to an extent. So Charles Manson was a troubled youth and became a troubled adult. He was in and out of jail. His mom didn't want him. I believe he stated in here that his mom was a prostitute or a drug addict. I don't remember too much because this was a while ago. Trying to play catch up with book reviews. But long story short, it kind of progressed into his adulthood. And he was in and out of the jail system, so this goes back to That sociology experiment in the 70s. I know it. I read a paper on it. I read the movie. I saw the movie. The Stanford experiment? Stanford experiment? Okay. Brain fart. Quarantine for way too dang long. We'll go back to it. So, long story short, Manson. Troubled youth, blah, 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 blah. Created a family. Went on a murder spree. So, there was a famous actress. Her name was Sharon Tate. Along with her friends, one was a Folgers heiress, her boyfriend, and her Sharon Tate's hairstylist, I believe. And they were all staying at this house in LA or Beverly Hills, somewhere in California, somewhere expensive. And there was Manson's family, so there was only 3 of them this time, 4 of them, that went in and killed them. So Sharon Tate, this is one that kind of rattles my bones a little bit. She was 8 months pregnant, and they stabbed her, I think, like 47 times, and they didn't have enough time to gut her of her child and kill the child. Like, it was just a whole thing, but like they were all stabbed 30 plus times in their home. They just showed up and stabbed them. So for a lot of people, you didn't know that there was a rhyme or a meaning or a motive. But when reading the book, you actually discover what the motive is to an extent, because I don't think they ever really physically found a motive. But it goes through the whole trials, and then there was the La Bianca murders, which happened 2 nights after. A man and a woman, and they were stabbed to death. And with the Manson murder specifically, obviously there was, 7 killings, could be more. From what it says, it could be upwards of 20 people or something like that. I think it states in the book. But long story short is that they wrote on the walls. There was Piggy, Murder Piggy, and then Helter Skelter. So with that being said, you discover kind of a lot what's happened within the family, what Manson was making them do, just all of that stuff. And it was a hard read. But what I really liked about this novel, it was written by Vincent Bugliosi and Curt Gentry. So Vincent Bugliosi was actually the prosecuting lawyer throughout this whole case. And this case lasted about a couple years. And it talks about basically from beginning to end, like who Charles Manson was, what actually the first chapter was the murders. Like, it literally just like dropped you into the murders, like what happened, what was found. Like, you didn't know who did it. Like, it was not one of those things like, oh, I knew who did this. Like, you don't know who did this. But the way it drops you in, like, you're dropped in, like, you're the cop, like you're Vincent. He's trying to tell you what happened through his eyes in an educated fashion. And I really appreciated that. And then I don't know lawyer lingo. Like, I'm not even going to pretend to know lawyer lingo. I don't know lawyer lingo. Not my cup of tea. Never liked law at all. Took pre-law in high school. Not a fan. He dumbed it down. He dumbed it down enough so I could understand. And if I can understand, y'all can understand. And if you can't, like, he has little asterisks at the bottom that's like, okay, let me explain what this word means or what I was trying to tell you through this. And it's like little sub-paragraphs with like an explanation of the top paragraphs. And it was a fantastic novel. Like, it tells you about Charles Manson, the family, why they became part of the family, just all of that stuff. And it's just, the murders was personally like really hard for me to get through, because he does go into detail, and he does like show you, or not, yeah, well, there's pictures, there's literally pictures in this book. He does show you, and he does really well with detailing what the crime scene looked like, and he's very, very, very detailed. So if you're like me, and when you read, it's like a movie in your head. That's how I read. It's literally a movie in my head. So when you're trying to explain that to me and it's a movie in my head, it doesn't sit well. Like, yes, I was in the medical field for 5 years. Doesn't mean I saw that stuff. I was a you know, internal medicine and primary care nurse. Like, I didn't see that stuff. Like, I saw, like, you know, like, a couple things. Like, I've seen some stuff, but, like, not enough for me to, like, see blood and gore and guts and stuff like that. The only reason why I saw those was because my dad was a klutz. That's it. Like, my dad gutted himself constantly, and it was an accident because he was just super klutzy. But I literally, like, I had to push myself through it, and I had to make sure that I didn't eat. I hadn't eaten before I started reading it. That part anyway. Once I got through that part, like, I was really scared to, like, so I would, like, follow the same precautions that I would, like, through the murders, but, like, as I got further on the book, it didn't get that bad. So it started getting into detail about the court cases, and then it really had a whole section dedicated to Manson. And obviously this whole book is dedicated to Manson, but not just Manson, though. Manson was, like, the father of the family, but there was more to it. Like, there was, you know, Squeaky and Leslie and all of these other, you know, Patreon. There was a Charlie. There was Charles and Charlie, so there's two of them. There was Watkins. Just so many other people, but, like, there was a whole section dedicated to Manson. So, like, what happened as he became an adult, when he got out of jail, he basically really, really, really wanted to be a writer. Or not a writer, a rock star, basically. And he was delusional. Like, he literally thought that the Beatles knew him. Like, they wrote the whole White Album. Like, the White Album is referenced heavily in this novel because that's where a lot of Manson's ideals came from, was the White Album. Now, I don't want to tell you the whole thing, like the whole motive and his ideals and stuff like that, because I really want you guys to read this, because this was a fantastic novel. 5 out of 5 if you can get through it for nonfiction. I'm a fantasy girl myself, like fantasy, like an adult. Powered through this. I actually, once I got past the murders, like, I couldn't put the book down. Like, this lived in my purse. Literally lived in my purse. So, like, I would go anywhere. I would go to work, and I would be watching a game while I'm game guiding with this thing open next to the tablet, watching my game and reading, because I didn't want to put this book down because it was that good. It literally just goes back into, like, the whole conspiracy theory. Like, it really makes you think, too. And this book was fantastic. Like I said, Vincent Bugliosi and Curt Gentry did a fantastic job on this novel. Really making it for the normal person to read in regards to, like, the legal lingo and, like, the laws. Like, it literally tells you the laws and describes the laws. Like I said, there's pictures. Just looking at them when there's little bits around. But like I said, it's a really good read. This book has been out for years. I think this one should be taught in a lot of schools. Not high schools, but colleges, because heavy stuff in here. But this was actually a really good read. I would totally suggest picking it up if you are like me and need to read a classic a year and a nonfiction a year. This one would be a really good one, just so it's like, you know, obviously the hype of Charles Manson's died down since his passing, but still, it's one of those things that it's a good read. It's good to brush up on your past history too, especially recent history, because we always look back in, like, the 1800s, 1900s, or 1800s, 1700s, 1600s. We always look back that way, but we never look directly in the 1900s. We don't look like 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like, we look now. Like, yeah, obviously, like, you have major life events and stuff like that, but this is one of those ones that it's historical. It's like a recent historical kind of thing. It's good. Like, I recommend this novel. But yeah, so I would say read it. Again, this is going to be Helter, Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Curt Gentry. Yeah, pick it up. It's good, I promise.